All right, Richie, welcome to the podcast and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Alex. It's always a pleasure to chat with amazing and inspirational people like yourself who are doing great things in the world.
Right back at you. No, I've been looking forward to this. I'm not sure if you saw, I did a little Instagram post a couple of days ago announcing that we were going to be chatting. And for the best part of 3 months from the launch of Flourish, you've been in my ears almost every day. So it's nice to be able to actually have some response back.
That's so funny. That's so funny. Wow.
Yeah. So it's been a bit of a lifesaver ultimately. And I know a lot of people would agree that have used it, especially with everything that has gone on this year. I think it's been a lifeline for people just to kind of tap into breath work and to have that vehicle to be able to express some of the stuff that's been coming up for us all.
I mean, yeah, I think in many ways, not just with like Flourish and the stuff I've been doing, but I'm just seeing it everywhere. A lot of breath workers are really stepping up and sharing their gifts just because of how powerful and effective the work is. And obviously the fact that it's just breathing, it's not like you need to go to the gym to do it or anything like that. You can do it anywhere. So I think it's definitely appears to be one of the key tools of our time in trying to work through the time that we're in right now. It's as is very understandable, there's a lot of dread and anxiety that is just kind of sitting as an undercurrent throughout most countries and societies, I think, right now, with a lot of people just not really sure what's going on and what's about to happen. And so, yeah, just being able to use something that we already have anyway, our breath, as a tool to be able to help ourselves, whether it's physically, mentally, or emotionally, is really powerful stuff.
Yeah, definitely. My first exposure to breathwork was October last year. So this is kind of a relatively new thing for me, but that first experience was so powerful that it has kind of just transformed my life ultimately, and including the trajectory in which like my career may go and things like this. It's incredible. So to be able to speak to you, I've had some other breath workers on as well. So as you kind of mentioned, they've almost come out the woodwork during lockdown with their Instagram lives and things like this. And it's beautiful to see.
Yeah. It's very common for people to put their first breathwork session as like one of the top 5 or top 10 most important moments in their life, just because of, how profound it can be. So I'm so happy that it's been useful for you.
Yeah, definitely. I know Kate, my wife, we've both been just been really utilizing breathwork during this time. So I know that she would agree with that. But before we go any further, Richie, there may be people who aren't as familiar with you as I am. So I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times on podcasts before, but are you happy just to share a little bit about your kind of background and what's got you to where you are today, I guess?
Of course. Yeah. So I wasn't always teaching breathwork. Funnily enough, there's not a university degree for breathwork. It's not something that someone comes out of high school and thinks, you know what, I'm going to teach people how to breathe for a living. No, I was originally working in management consulting in one of these big consulting firms and did that for about 6 years. When I eventually decided that wasn't for me, I left that and I learned how to code and program and build apps and websites, and that became my line of work for a little while. And it was during that time that my dad was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which is a autoimmune disease. And like basically all autoimmune diseases, there's no real magic cure. There's not like here's take a course of antibiotics and you'll be fine. It's often something that people have to deal with for a lifetime sometimes. And so my mom and I were always looking for ways to be able to help him. Luckily, my mom's also, she was been in like the fitness and health and wellness industry her entire life as well, and very into nutrition. So she was very much taking the nutritional aspect and trying to work out what's the best diet for Dad. And I was just kind of, perusing podcasts and surfing the web and just seeing, all right, what's out there? And I came across a podcast with this man named Wim Hof. He's known as the Iceman, for those of you who have never heard of Wim Hof. He's this crazy Dutch guy, and he's famous because he has 20-something world records, all related to cold exposure. So things like swimming in the ice for the longest distance. He nearly summited Everest just wearing his shorts and nothing else. So all these kinds of crazy things. And it was through his experience in these cold situations, these extreme moments, that he created this technique that, as it turns out, is great for everyone's health and well-being. And it just involves cold exposure gradually. So things like starting off by just taking a cold shower, and then slowly moving up to things like maybe ice baths or jumping in a cold sea or something like that. And also breathing techniques. And the reason why I found it really interesting was because on this podcast, he was saying how it seems to be really useful for people who have autoimmune issues. So like MS. So I ended up traveling to Poland in the middle of winter and spending a week learning this technique in this little tiny village. And we were, hiking in the snow barefoot in our shorts. It's like -3 and 4 degrees out. We're swimming in ice lakes. We're climbing mountains in our shorts, -19 degrees. Really doing all these amazing, crazy things. And but that sounds like something pretty amazing. But what really struck me during this time was actually the breath work that we were doing. So practically, what it looked like was we were staying in this hotel, and we would go into the basement of this hotel. It's all dark and moody, and we would lie down, and the instructor would lead us through like 30 to 45 minutes of these specific breathing techniques. And the experience that I was having was just unbelievable, going through cycles of feeling physical sensation in the body to feelings of various emotion, whether it was like bliss or laughter and happiness, to complete euphoria, to feelings of power and strength, and almost kind of like a primal aggression. I was really tapping into something that I'd never actually tapped into before in my life. And that was really what planted the seed for breathwork for me. Was I remember thinking, coming out of that session, we would do it first thing in the morning before breakfast, sitting at the breakfast table after my very first deep breathwork session. And I distinctly remember being like having a spoonful of eggs at my mouth, and just then thinking, like, if we can feel this way just by breathing, then why doesn't everybody know about this? I was like, what's going, like, how is this possible? So that was the start. But to cut a long story short, anyway, I came back home, and Dad saw the photos and heard all the stories of my experiences there. And then he started doing the breathing and the cold showers every day, changed his diet as well. And that combination proved to be very powerful for him, and which meant that, we're years down the track now, and the progression of his MS completely stopped in its tracks.
Wow.
So that was how it started. And then I just kind of became addicted. I just went, okay, what else is there? Like, what are other people doing with breath? Like, maybe I'm missing something here. Maybe I'm leaving a whole lot of things on the table. So I started Googling, and I found out that there's this thing called breathwork, and that it's been around for a while, and that there are all sorts of different ways to do it with all sorts of interesting people who are teaching various applications. So that started about a 3.5-year journey, I think, for me, of just living out of a backpack essentially, and just traveling all over the world. Wow. Learning from different breathwork masters, psychologists, counselors, therapists, doctors, physiotherapists, yogis, all sorts of different people who are doing something interesting with breathing. And so, now here I am, a student of the breath, and just trying to share what I've learned, and it's proving to be something that seems to be making a big difference in people's lives.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. There's definitely been a real sort of resurgence in interest in breath work. It's kind of everywhere at the moment, and it's so cool to see. And that kind of story, I guess, really shows the power of it, along with other sort of interventions that your dad was doing, for example, but just the transformational elements I think it has in us. So my initial response was a little bit like yours, where I was just out loud laughing in front of a bunch of strangers that for me is a little bit rare anyway, through to feeling like deep sadness ultimately. That I think the sadness was partly that this was accessible to me and I hadn't been accessing it. I hadn't had the skills to know that I can just breathe in this way and actually create this kind of state and have access to these emotions. And it felt intuitively, I don't know what, if you've spoken to people about this, Rich, or if you have a similar experience, it felt like some of those emotions were kind of in previous emotions that hadn't been expressed in my life for whatever reason, both negative ones I'd kind of suppressed, but as well as kind of some of the positive ones that maybe I didn't give myself permission to truly feel in that moment. And that's quite, I think, an interesting kind of concept as well.
You hit the nail on the head. If we have highly emotional events, whether it's trauma or even an accumulation of micro stresses in our life that slowly build up stress and tension in our nervous system, and we don't allow the body to go through its natural rhythm and cycle of how to process that emotion for a multitude of different reasons, that stays with us and gets imprinted in our neurology. And if you believe in things like energy, energetically as well. But what the breath allows you to do is actually to calm down that monkey mind, to slow down the part of our brain that is constantly thinking, has that inner voice, and has all the filters, has all the rules of what we're allowed and not allowed to do, or to think, or to feel, or to experience, and allows you to then to tap into the deeper parts of yourself that might be things like trauma, that might be things like the sadness, grief, anger. One of the big journeys through my breathwork journey has been working out how to express anger, because I kind of grew up in a way in a household of like, always be very polite, always be very pleasant, we've always be loving. And I disconnected from my ability to be able to feel and express anger. And a lot of my early breathwork experiences was a lot of reconnecting to that, and even letting and releasing a lot of anger. And some of it was, it didn't even feel like it was coming from me. It felt like it was coming from something far deeper than what I am, like these kind of primal urges, these primal expressions of anger and rage. So yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's actually one of the amazing applications of breathwork is its therapeutic value in completing these cycles of heightened emotion that we might be holding on to. It's kind of like spring cleaning yourself. If you're constantly, as you grow up through life, you're accumulating and accumulating and accumulating based off your experiences and your environments and whoever's around you, these imprints, these emotional imprints, whether they are large or small. Well, breathwork is one of the really great ways of kind of just starting to close the chapters on those, spring clean it, and kind of release. So yeah, you're spot on. And especially when I do a lot of work one-to-one with people, that's the primary thing we're doing, is we're going very, very deep into working through things that perhaps they haven't been able to work through before. And it's what's so amazing about a lot of these types of therapies, like these somatic and body type of therapies, is that while I love and believe in all the talk therapy that's out there, it can sometimes be quite tricky to really get to the point of integrating something that had happened in the past, especially if it's emotional, because a lot of the time emotion isn't rational. And so if you're trying to talk your way to the emotion, you're not always going to get there, because rationally it doesn't always make sense. The amount of times I've had experiences in breath work where I just be breathing away, and then all of a sudden perhaps a memory comes from my childhood, maybe 4 years old, 5 years old, that wasn't a repressed memory. It's something that I remember really well, but all of a sudden behind that memory comes this incredible emotion, this incredible, like, if one I can think of it specifically, is like there was incredible confusion, incredible feelings of betrayal. And this was a simple moment of when I was being a naughty kid, and my dad just gave me a little spank on the bottom, which doesn't seem like too much at really, but at that moment in time, it was like my world had been turned upside down. And that emotion I've held on to that for over, 20 something years. So
Wow.
you would never get there with talk therapy, but there are these amazing therapies like somatic experiencing, um, trauma release exercises, TRE, breath work, that take a body approach into working through things that might be holding you back. And I think the combination of any kind of talk therapy, coaching, and these somatic therapies as well really is a beautiful way in creating big changes in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I forget, by the way, you've reminded me, I spoke to Eddie. Is it Eddie Plum this morning?
Eddie Plum.
And I
Plum.
think it's Plum. He's a touch therapist living in Bali now.
Oh, okay.
He says
Eddie.
Eddie. He
Yes,
says
yes,
hi.
yes. Oh, yes, he's incredible. He is, we actually met at a breathwork training.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's something called Biodynamic Breathwork, which is a really, really great. It's like 50% breathwork, 50% kind of like a movement practice, where it's really about coming in deep into the body and really staying embodied in the session and feeling how the body wants to move as you experience various things. And that movement is another way of the releasing of tension in the nervous system. It's really great. And then Eddie's an incredible therapist too. So,
Yeah.
oh well, that's so great that you guys got in contact.
Yeah. He kind of said hi, or he said for me to say hi to you because he knew we were speaking. So I just wanted to do that before I forget to say it at the end. Um,
He's gonna kill me if he listens to this and he's like, "You didn't remember my last name." It's out of the blue. That's amazing.
Yeah, so what we spoke about was very similar to what you've just mentioned there, and it certainly kind of translocates into my experience. So on two occasions in particular, and it seems to be more prominent in when I'm doing group breath work rather than on my own in the house. But one time doing transformational breath, another time doing holotropic breath, and might as well have been on like a vibrating machine. My whole body was just discharging something. I don't know what, and I guess I don't need to know what, but I just found it so interesting that there's that just such physical response to just like the beginning of breath work.
Yeah, absolutely. And the physicality of breath work, you can put it down to in a couple of look at it in a couple of ways. At a real physiological level, you are affecting your systems in a big way, particularly when you're doing things like holotropic breath work or transformational breath, where it's this faster than normal, deeper than normal, controlled superventilation, right? You're breathing much more than you usually would. So, you are creating a very real sympathetic response in the body. You are electrifying your nervous system. You are changing the balance of gases in your blood and affecting your blood chemically. That can cause all sorts of different sensations. But at the same time, if you can look at it through the energetic route as well, where we are, if you take the yogic view of energy work, is that we are, air is, when we breathe in prana, which is kind of life force energy, and we are supercharging ourselves with all this energy. And we have, in our body, Chinese medicine calls them meridians. In yogic philosophy, they call it nadis. We have these energy channels that run throughout all our body. And just like how you can have a tight hamstring, you can have, blockages or abnormalities in your energy body as well. And through this, then, you can start to experience physical sensation in certain parts of the body, as that maybe you start to supercharge yourself and really introduce a lot of energy into the body. You might feel blockages or things get stuck in certain parts of the body. So, there's lots of different ways to look at it, but that's kind of the cool thing about breath work, right? It's like you within 30 seconds, you start to feel things happening. It has a very instant gratification or instant response. You get, oh my gosh, something's going on. But what's really interesting is that the more that you do breath work, the less that you actually feel the physical sensation. As the body adapts, as your energy systems start to adapt, And it becomes less and less about going for the physical sensation and more about just the deeper states of awareness, or the deeper states of that altered consciousness that you can access through breath work.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point that I wanted to, I guess, dive into a little bit more. I was speaking to a client this morning, and I recommended she consider and explore some breath work for various reasons. And I mentioned to her that from what I've experienced myself, but also some of the commentary within the forum in Flourish, people have commented about not peaks and troughs, but peaks and plateaus in sort of their progression. So often it starts and you have huge emotional responses, and they seem to dull down a little bit, and then you plateau, and then suddenly it happens again. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, it's you kind of see it in most things in life, even in a very physical way. If you're like really into weights training or strength training, quite often when you first start, you have these massive improvements, and all of a sudden you plateau for a little while, and then something triggers you to go into the next climb or the next rise. And it's the same with meditation. It's the same with breath work. It seems to be a common story. And my experience with breath work has been absolute. Like, sometimes I've hit plateaus for months, where the experience, while always different, doesn't necessarily feel like it's maybe progressing in some way. And there's a lesson in that always, because the moments where, at least, excuse me, in my experiences that I've had, my biggest moments of growth, or my biggest moments of expansion or unfolding, or releasing or healing, have always been the moments when I kind of like gave up, or stopped trying, or stopped expecting or willing something to happen. It's very common actually that in breath work, even, a lot of the time you're breathing quite deeply for a period of time, and you might be having some experiences, and then the facilitator might say, okay, now time to relax and slow things down, and then the person who's breathing kind of goes, oh, okay, well, we're really nearly at the end. Okay, I can just chill now. And then boom, something happens. Sometimes it's that final 10 minutes of a breathwork session where you're kind of out of it. You're not really doing anything anymore, that you have the most expansive experience, or the most important experience, or the most important healing. Um, so, so yeah, for me, when I work with people, although you can always take an intention or have some sort of intention for what you want to do in a breathwork session, I always kind of say, take that intention and plant it in your brain, in your brain, kind of seed it in there, but then forget about it. And don't even be wedded to the results of it. Don't think about it anymore. Just breathe and see what happens. And for me, that's always seems to be the most powerful thing, is that rather than thinking and analyzing your sessions and being like, I'm not really progressing, doesn't really seem to be changing, just let go of any idea of results or expectation, and just do it for the love of doing it. And then you'll see what happens.
Yeah, idea of surrendering into it, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think most practices that give us the greatest growth are around surrender, I believe. Because we live in a society now, and we're seeing it very much, and it's amplified in a massive way right now, where we just don't feel safe in many ways. And right now there's a very real physical worry for our safety with the virus and stuff. But even before the virus, we are always very, very worried for our safety in some way. It might not seem obvious on the surface level, but if you follow the track or the trail of beliefs and unconscious patterns of thought and thinking and feeling, there always comes down to this feeling of like, am I safe? Am I worthy? Am I good enough? Am I going to be able to survive? There's I'm just blanking on the fellow's name now, but it's really annoying me, but it won't come yet. But basically, this really great, quite well-known psychologist, which is why it's bad that I can't remember his name. Said that he believes that basically every single fear that you can have somehow relates back to the fear of death, and which is really, really interesting. So yeah, being able to learn how to surrender, to be able to let go of control, and learning how to trust is probably going to be the greatest journey that anyone can take, because that is essentially the journey from this thinking brain, the monkey brain that's constantly chattering, judging, and trying to work out how we're going to survive in this world, and moving from that place of survival into what is our place of, what I would say is flourishing, which is the heart. The greatest pilgrimage any person could ever take is from the mind to the heart, or the brain to the heart. Moving from feelings of survival to feelings of love. And how you get there is up to you. But I would say any of these practices that involve learning how to surrender, how to be in the moment, it is putting that survival instinct on hold and just coming back to the truth of who we are. And that is really just God embodied, right? Sorry to anyone who kind of freaks out with the G word. But if you don't want to go think about it that way, just think that we're pretty freaking cool and we're pretty awesome and we're all little miracles, and that's the truth, but we've forgotten. So that's all.
Nice. On that sort of topic or theme of surrendering, do you have any advice from either experience maybe around it? Is it a matter of just sort of small steps and kind of not obviously going maybe into holotropic breath work as your first thing? Because I was speaking to the client I was speaking to this morning, her fear was one of what would happen if she allowed stuff to come up. And that seems to be a conversation I've had a few times with people who are very worried about breath work, psychedelics, whatever it may be, because they're worried kind of almost the consequences, what the decisions they may have to make. And we had a very honest conversation. She was like, and I know, Alex, like intellectually, I know there's stuff there that I do need to process, but I'm scared of almost figuring out truthfully what that stuff is. So how, if someone is in that sort of situation where they know they probably need to lean into it, but are struggling to do so, is there anything just maybe from your own experiences or what others have told you that might be helpful here?
Yeah, I see it all the time as well. Because you go along in life creating a certain life that feels very comfortable and very familiar. You have your circle of friends, you have your routines, you have, maybe, in a more kind of material way, maybe you have a mortgage, or, even just a lease in London is bloody expensive. You might have a partner who you've been with for a long time and all these things. But then there's that little tickle in the back of you, or this little twinge in your heart, or this little grumble in your stomach that's saying that something's not right. And it really is up to you as to how you want to approach it, because I think you have to kind of decide for yourself, what is more important, your happiness or being comfortable? Because many people will choose to be miserably, or stay in the miserable familiar, rather than taking a chance at the blissful unknown, if that makes sense. We are really, really wanting to know everything that's going to happen to us all the time. Like, we want to feel, and this comes back to the safety. This comes back to the feeling of needing to be in control. I want to know that I have food on my table. I want to know that I have a roof over my head. I want to know that I'm going to be loved, and that I'm going to have friends and people who can support me. And I want to know that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be safe. And if you know that you are potentially going to go onto a journey that might change you in some sort of fundamental way, then there's that connection of, you know, am I still going to fit into the life that I have? All the security that I've built up for myself. And I guess the question is, well, is that your best life anyway, if this is how you're feeling? And, you know, to be honest with you, I have worked with many, many people who have started their breathwork journey and as a result have had to break up with partners or have had to, you know, say goodbye to some friends or, you know, change their social circles or move countries, you know. But ultimately it's an unfolding into your truth. And it depends what you want to get out of life, right? Like you can probably have a pretty great, you know, comfortable life if you stay down the path that you're on. Maybe you'll a few years later, that twinge will still be there, and you'll think, actually, I probably should have done something a few years ago, but I'm deeper in it now. It's actually harder to get out or harder to change now. Or you could rip the Band-Aid off and jump into something like holotropic breath work. But I think, you know, the most important thing, and this is what I always check with all my clients, is that you do have some sort of support network around you as you go through these changes, if that's what your desire is, because it's important that you do feel supported, and obviously that's the job of the person who's facilitating you as well in the professional sense. But you know, if you have friends or family that you feel like can understand you and say things are changing and like I'm going through a process of unfolding maybe into who it is I really am. I think, yeah. But the other thing as well is also to trust that as you start to go through these changes, as you go along your journey, that new people are going to come into your life that are almost going to match you a little bit better or match you and meet you where you're at in this new stage. That's been my experience, you know, is like you kind of have to be a little bit more comfortable with this idea of people coming into your life and people coming out, but that being okay, you know. But in terms of practically, you know, what can you do to kind of get started? So that, I mean, if from a very practical breathwork perspective, there are, you know, styles of breath that are much softer than, say, jumping straight into an integrative style breathwork like your holotropic breathwork, transformational breath, rebirthing, any of these guys. You know, doing something like Wim Hof method is a really nice way to dip your toe into things. And obviously, you know, well, I'm not to plug the app, but things like Flourish as well has been designed in a way to be able to not necessarily go the full way, but to take you gently through an experience and on a journey. That's why we call them journeys on the app. But, you know, just something like that, just to kind of get started. But I would always suggest that, you know, having some sort of support network there, and maybe, you know, bring a friend along with you who can kind of share the same experiences as you. And so you can talk about it so you don't feel like you're alone, you know. See if you can convince your friend to say, hey, let's go to a breathing class, and watch them laugh at first. And then they'll go, wait, are you being serious? And you say, yeah, you know, go, yeah, you know, take someone with you. And then hold on.
Yeah, no, I think those are great recommendations. I think what resonates for me actually there is the concept of trust. And is there maybe not always, but certainly sometimes is that a mirror kind of, you know, if we're not trusting ourselves, if we're not trusting that we have the resources required to navigate ourselves through that journey and that integration of the experience, then we're not going to trust that experience in the first place. So yeah, that was interesting.
Everything is a reflection of you, right? And we hear that a lot, and you know, it's one of those funny things where things that sound cliche, you know, you might hear something like the answer is always love, or, you know, everything is a reflection of you, or, you know, be the change that you want to see in the world. And all of these things might sound cliche, but it's because it's true. And quite often, you know, it just takes your own experience to kind of go into a roundabout way where you kind of then have this aha moment of, oh, damn it. Okay. I get it now. And yeah, trust is another one. You know, if you start to, you know, have these worries about, you know, I don't know if I'm ready to go into this because I don't know what's going to happen. Well, just know that, again, that response itself is telling you a lot about yourself. You know, the lack of trust in you, like you said, to have the resources available, or the trust in the people around you to accept you for who you are always, you know. So it's really always good to be quite introspective. You know, whenever you feel emotional about something, it's showing you something about you, which is like this is a really, really interesting thing to get into the habit of. If someone ticks you off, let's say, I don't know, you're hopping on the tube and someone kind of ducks in front of you and gets on and gets the last spot and you don't get on, and you're just like, rah, rah, you know, you feel that angry and that injustice in the world because you're going to have to wait 90 seconds for the next train to arrive, you know, but it's going to piss you off for the next 4 hours. To be able to take a moment there to go, why is it that I've reacted so strongly to that? Like, what is it about me that is making me feel this way? And if you start to take that level of control over your reaction and understand that you're kind of the cause of everything, then you start to really liberate yourself. That's called sovereignty. You know, that's when you develop sovereignty over yourself, when you go, I am the cause always. And if you decide that, then now you can do something about it. It's that moving from being a victim to being the cause.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's hard to accept sometimes that, you know, the world is essentially that mirror. And I always remember, I think one of the things that started this for me was listening to a podcast maybe 5 years ago or so. And I just thought the guy made such a great point, which was whenever he's feeling frustrated with his wife, he knows that something is off in his internal world because he's been with her for 20 years. He loves her. She's not doing anything that she probably hasn't been doing all along. So why am I now reacting to it? And I thought that sort of shift in perspective, like exactly like you say there, is such a powerful one. And for me, I know if little things are getting to me, it's really normally because I'm not meeting my own needs in some way, whether that's I haven't been doing enough stress management stuff, or work's been too busy, or I haven't been exercising as much as I should be, kind of thing. It's normally because I'm not doing something that is important to me. And as a result, my tolerance almost of the world has declined, so to speak.
Yeah, we have a capacity to be able to deal with things, right? And let's say if we have our bucket of let's say it's our stress bucket, for example, where the more and more it fills up, the more and more we start to feel it until eventually it overflows and we go into full breakdown mode, right? And the general level of how filled up that bucket is going to determine how much kind of headroom you have to be able to deal with certain situations that come up in your life. Now, what we're finding right now, of course, is that because of the general underlying anxiety that's just persistent right now, everyone's bucket is kind of filled up to here all the time, which means that, you know, you only have a tiny little thing is required for you to set you off. So you're so right. You know, having an awareness of yourself and where you're at, especially at a nervous system level. This would be a great one to talk to Eddie about one day, right? Get him on here and talk about that. Yeah, so you know, having an awareness and practices to be able to essentially refresh yourself, to decrease the general the fullness of that bucket, I suppose, so that you have a capacity to be able to deal with the stresses that, you know, everyone deals with in real life. But at the same time, it's another interesting one to kind of dive into your belief system. Okay, here's an example. So my ex-girlfriend, she doesn't have the best, let's say, grasp on time, in that she was late all the time. She's one of these beautiful beings where she has the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. But what it meant was that she's very much just constantly in emotions and not always so tangibly in the world, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so when she would be late, in the beginning of the relationship, it used to really tick me off, to a point where I felt like I had to have like interventions to be like, we can't keep doing this kind of thing. Like, this is getting nuts. But then I did go through the process of like, well, what does this actually mean? Like, what is it about her that's being late? Like, how is my perception of her being late making me upset? And when I drilled down to it was that basically how I was perceiving it was that her being late meant that she didn't care about me. And that was the belief. And that was actually the hurt. The hurt was like, I am not enough for her. She doesn't care about me. And as soon as I realized that, and it was like a relief, because then I was like, well, that's obviously not true. And then I even talked to her about it and was like, you definitely care about me, right? And she's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, whew, okay, cool. We can bury that. And then whenever she was late, it didn't actually affect me anymore, because one, I went, okay, well, you know what? I'm also going to accept this about this person. And then that's the way they are. In that case, that's fine. It doesn't mean that it's not projecting anything on me. It's literally just the way it is. Then it became an absolute non-issue. And it never affected the relationship again. That's not why we broke up. but yeah, so it's really, going down to the next level of questioning and going, why? And then maybe asking why again. And then maybe asking why again. I think there's, again, I'm often quite bad at remembering names. I'm forgetting who told me this as well, but they say that quite often, if you ask why 5 times, you're really getting to the crux of the core belief that is driving your behavior.
That's really interesting. I can relate to that. Katie isn't the best at being on time. and I'm the other way. Like, throughout my life, really, especially, I guess, kind of early 20s, maybe, I would always be there like 20-30 minutes early to situations. I didn't even want to arrive on time. So you've got kind of that polar opposite thing going on. But again, you can either take it at face value and get angry or frustrated that there's such a difference in that sort of behavior, or you can figure out what's going on there. And you saying that starts to get me thinking a little bit more about why in the past, if I needed to be places so early, and it's a similar explanation, probably, this idea of I didn't want to offend someone. I didn't want to upset someone because that makes me feel or felt uncomfortable and awkward. And therefore it's almost a protective sort of behavior to avoid something that I wouldn't be comfortable experiencing, but to a little bit of an extreme tendency at times. So yeah, I can relate.
Great.
Interesting. So, is there anything that you, based on all of this, that kind of you feel is important to raise within a conversation of breath work and healing, and essentially, I guess, self-growth, which has almost been the theme of today?
I think it's been a pattern in my life, and a pattern I've seen a lot of other people as well. And it's that we're always in such a rush to try and get somewhere, or to develop or progress or heal. This idea of, if I go to this retreat and do this course and then read this book and this podcast, and maybe I will be whatever it is that I hope to be. And maybe you have this kind of like grand vision of this perfect version of you that maybe you're aspiring to be. One thing, and that's all very good, like taking like that action in the direction is really important. But one thing I think is really important to recognize and kind of gets lost a lot in a lot of transformational work is this idea that if you believe that you need all this work to heal or to transform or to progress in life, to develop yourself as and whoever it is and into this version of who you want to be, you're automatically creating separateness from that version. You're automatically saying that I am not that, but I hope one day I will be, which is kind of like an affirmation, unconscious affirmation that you're saying, one day I'll be healed. I'm waiting for the sign that tells me that I'm healed. You know, I need that experience, or I need that approval from a teacher or a guru or whoever to tell me that I'm now healed. One thing that you have to try and remember, and it's this funny thing that, I mean, everything's polarity in the world. And it's like, you are who you are, but you're already that person. You are already it. There is no separation. The only separation comes from, you know, our perceptions. And so if you are able to take the position of, I am brilliant the way that I am, and I know that I'm just on a journey, and that person that maybe I'm hoping to aspire to be in 2 to 3 years, well, actually, that is already just me. It's already inside me. I am already that. And then still go through the steps, but take it with a new, don't take it from a level of desperation and clawing. I'm trying to get to a place, but purely more from a place of unfolding. So I really like the word unfolding, because what it means is like, we're not trying to change who we are, like in the same way that a flower blooms. You know, that's why they always, you always see the use of the lotus in yogic teaching. It's like, we're not changing ourselves. We're not adding anything to us. It's simply a coming from within to express without. It's like the so within, so without. So it's having that belief in yourself that you are already everything that you need to be in this world. And you already have, actually, in a funny way, you already have all the knowledge. You already have all the wisdom. You already have everything you need. And the journey that you take on with various courses and learnings and healings and stuff, you know, that is just steps in the journey to help you to unfold and to remember what it is, to remember the truth. You know, there are plenty of people, more and more these days, because I think like the younger generation that's coming through now are like just highly tapped in. A lot of these guys and girls they're not even needing to go and do any kind of training or education. They already know. It's absolutely amazing. Like I'm talking like young people, like people in like their late teens, early 20s, mid 20s, who are kind of in this line of work. Like they're not even needing to get a qualification or learn how to do Reiki or any of these things. They can already do it. And they trust themselves that they can do it. And they can kind of tap into something greater, and then it just happens. And that's possible for everybody, but it's just that, you know, the generations before have just been really conditioned to this idea of, you know, you need to go through like this formal process or something like that. But just trust yourself, because at the end of the day, all healing modalities, it's all pointing in the same direction. It's like we're all trying to get to the same place, just through different paths. And that place is, you know, people have different words for it, but what the holotropic breathwork guys will say is wholeness. We're just moving towards a place of wholeness. That's it. That's what holotropic literally means. And so, yeah, so give yourself a break, number one. Take the pressure off yourself. You already are everything you need to be. You're just unfolding. So, yeah, that's about it.
There's a lot of wisdom in that, Richie, and there's a few things that come up. One of them is the author, I think the author Richard Holden, I think is his name. He has a quote which I always remember, which is, self-acceptance is a prerequisite for self-development, which kind of sums up the first part of what you said there. And it's
Yeah.
such a powerful part, and it's a real sucker punch. You know, I've definitely been lost in the world of self-development, and fundamentally there was an element of the me that I just wasn't accepting at that point in time. And it's that, I guess it's that simultaneous acceptance, while appreciating that doesn't mean that you can't want to be better or whatever it may be. You can still accept yourself and desire to improve in some area of life. And I think sometimes we get confused in that, thinking that, well, we can't accept ourselves because that means I'm just going to kind of retire and give up with life. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I love what you say about remembering. I saw someone post recently on the idea of most of us needs to unlearn. And I think it's a similar kind of idea that, you know, most of us have experienced true health, vitality, joy, love, etc. There's almost a returning home to these innate fundamental qualities, rather than thinking that we're lacking something or we need to learn something more or know something more. And I see this in sort of more my industry of I guess nutritional therapy, functional medicine and things. And I had so many conversations with colleagues whereby we're getting to a point, I think a lot of people get to a point within their careers whereby actually they've accumulated so much knowledge that now it's like they're overwhelmed. It's like, well, I don't even know what to do with all of this knowledge, because there's too much of it to be able to then bring back to a practical modality of how do I heal and support this person through their journey. And I think you're right in this idea of remembering and unlearning and unfolding into what is and what was, for want of a better expression.
Yeah, I think, but probably in nutritional medicine, I'm guessing you're probably seeing a lot of the same, and that's why like things like the paleo diet came out, right? It's like this idea of like, let's go back to our roots,
Right.
quite literally, like let's go back to where it all began and just eat like that. And you're seeing it more and more actually in the health and wellness industry, of this idea of less is more, going back, you know. So even a lot of gyms these days, what's like, sure, you can do all the machines and run the treadmill, or you can like, do a calisthenics class, or this primal movement, where you move and you like move like an animal. Barefoot shoes are becoming a big thing when people are like, actually, let's go back to being as, making it simulate like walking barefoot everywhere in the world. I actually really like this idea, this idea of less is more, that we don't need much in our life to be strong, happy, and healthy. That as long as you kind of keep the basics and the fundamentals strong and the foundation strong, then everything kind of builds up really nicely on that. But, and it's really interesting. I mean, even you've probably seen things like the carnivore diet and stuff, right? Where it's literally like, strip everything back. I'm just going to eat red meat. So like, so it can go in lots of interesting ways. But yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes, there's what's the term? Paralysis by analysis, right?
Definitely.
Where we have too much information that we can't decide. Whereas sometimes if you only know one thing, then life gets really easy, because you just, you have a hammer, you see a nail, you know what to do. But if you have many tools, and sometimes you're like, oh, I don't know. And that actual amount, the options can actually cause more anxiety.
Yeah.
But that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, what you say. And I love that. The quote that you said from that other fellow whose name is Richard, which I picked up. That like one line of quote basically encapsulated my whatever 5 minutes of rambling. That was I think that's maybe my next area of development, is how to say things more concisely.
No, I think you said it very well, Richie. You said it very well. I'm mindful of time, and there's something that I definitely want to touch on today, which is you have a book coming out very soon, and I want to be able to give you an opportunity to, I guess, share what you want to about about the book, because it's available on pre-order at the moment. I know it's on Amazon, and I'm sure other
Yeah.
places maybe as well.
Yeah, it's basically available at all good bookstores, and on Amazon for pre-order right now. In the UK, it comes out September 10th, and in the US, it comes out October 13th. It's called Exhale, and basically what I wanted to do with this book was create the breathwork book I wish that I had when I first started. The breathwork world is a very big world, and I had to spend a lot of time and talk to a lot of people and travel to a lot of places to get this idea of the possibilities of what breathwork can do and how it all sort of fits together. So what I hope this book does for people is give that map of the territory of what are the different ways that you can use your breath, what is available to you, and then also to provide you with the practical guidance and instruction of how to do it. So for me, it's kind of like, although I think it'd be useful for everyone, the real person I had in mind for this book was someone who hasn't done or has just started dipping their toes into breath work and has just tried a couple of things and they want to learn more, or they just need something to get them started. That's the kind of place where I want this book to fit. So it's really exciting. It's been quite a few years in the making. Wow. And I'm just super excited that it's about to come out.
Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. I actually I got James Nestor's book through today, Breathe. So excited to read that before your one comes out in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, James is brilliant, and that book is it's one of the most like well-researched breathwork books that I've come across.
Wow.
I got halfway through and I was like, all right, cool, we're nearly there. And then I realized that it's the end of the book and there's like the other half of the book is just references to different studies and stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So really well-researched. I think James is a journalist by trade, so it's really, on point.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess with things becoming a little bit more flexible, is there anything worth mentioning in regards to like your schedule? Are you going to be at anything coming up that people might want to check you out with?
Nothing physically still.
Okay.
I'm still not sure exactly, what the go is with that. I mean, although gyms and studios are slowly opening up, I think there's probably not much appetite for a lot of people to get into a room indoors and breathe really heavily for a long time. So, so we're probably not going to do that for a little while longer. But online, I'm still busy. I've taken some time off recently, but I'm coming back with full gusto. And yeah, so there's a lot of stuff coming up online. So the best place to find out about anything I'm doing online is on my Instagram. So The Breath Guy on Instagram. My website, also thebreathguy.com, has information there as well. But my Instagram is the most up-to-date, almost kind of like notice board for anything that's coming up or that I'm doing. So best to find me on there.
Yeah, cool. And you just mentioned, obviously, we mentioned off air as well that you've been a little bit off grid recently to, well, I assume to do maybe a little bit of recharge and other things. Is there anything that, and obviously say no if there isn't, but is there anything that you want to share from your experience of kind of going off grid?
I think reconnecting back with nature is the most important thing that we can do right now, especially after being cooped up indoors for so long. Doesn't matter if you have a lot of houseplants, like you still need to really go back to the source. And I had the most amazing time. Basically, I did like a 6-week, almost complete digital detox, so I wasn't on social media, I wasn't on my emails or any news or anything like that. I really just was in nature, by myself, no distractions, and it was absolutely incredible. A lot of hiking, a lot of swimming in the ocean, but what I think probably the one thing that well, one of the things that became very apparent for me is I believe that we as a society have forgotten how to be bored,
Mhm.
because we have so many things that we can use to fill up all the empty space in our life. And sometimes we feel like we should, whether it's like reading a book or listening to an audiobook or a podcast, or there's a lot of like educational pieces that we can do, or we might just be watching TV or watching Netflix or whatever. you know and what I think we've forgotten how to do is how to just be without doing anything, and just let our imagination go wild. That was a big thing that I experienced, was just this renewed, um, almost like inspiration, because all the best ideas that we have come out of that space of inspiration, which we can only access when we're empty, really, when we're not trying to do a million things at once, or we're listening to that podcast while texting our wife while eating our dinner. Like being able to kind of create space in your life to have not really plan or do anything, and just be with yourself, I think is so valuable, not just for your health, but also for you to kind of really get a real perspective on where you're at. No distractions, you're just with you. And that can be confronting. And a lot of people will find that terrifying. But again, kind of back to our early conversation, if you find that idea terrifying, why is that? What is that? What is that? What's that trail that you can follow to go, well, why can't I just sit with myself? What's stopping me? So yeah, I think learn to schedule in empty space. I think is a really good thing to do. And it's not even like meditation. It's not even like breath work. It's not, don't schedule a practice or anything like that. Just schedule nothing, so that you can literally sit down and be like, I've got nothing to do. What do I do for the next half an hour that is nothing? And you can just sit there and think, or imagine, or just sit in boredom and see what happens.
Nice. It's such a good point. I think in all of the group breath sessions I've done, when we've done sort of a sharing circle afterwards, one of the common themes is, I can't remember the last time I just lied on the floor and didn't do anything for a couple of hours. And it's so true, that idea of just, as you say, being with that boredom, or in this case, we're still doing something, but it's very rare that people have that in their lives these days. And I would agree that that's a key message.
People, I think it's here in London, but it's definitely over in LA. Like they have something called old man yoga, I think it's called, where I think it's like a 1 hour class where I think the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes is like doing some very basic stretches, but then the remaining 45 minutes is just lying down and it's like sleeping. Nice. And then people will pay $20 to go to that class. Right? So it's like and that's the state of our world now, right? It's this idea of like, if we're not doing anything, then we're being lazy, right? And we're not progressing, we're not getting it, we're not hustling, so then people will go, well, in that case, the only way I can feel good about not doing something is if I pay $20, and then it means I give myself permission to not do anything, but it's for my health. It's all a bit funny, but yeah, I think even like you said, even if being just literally doing nothing and sitting with yourself seems like it's too intense, meditation, breath work, just something that's not using something within you rather than relying on something external outside of you for your entertainment, is something really really good to do.
Yeah, it's definitely a sort of a little bit of almost an epidemic. The number of conversations I've had with over the years, and I'm sure you're the same, Richie, where there's guilt about sitting on the couch on a Wednesday afternoon with a cup of tea for an hour. People don't think they should be doing these sorts of things. And as you say, the question becomes why, and exploring that and diving into it ultimately.
Yeah.
Awesome. Richie, thank you so much. It's been a real honor and pleasure to speak with you. Um, is there anything that you would like to conclude with? Anything you'd like to sort of re-emphasize, or anything we haven't yet touched on?
I think it's best just to wrap up. Otherwise, if you give me another opportunity to speak, I'll just go on another rant for the next 20 minutes. So
We'll go
just,
down another rabbit hole.
yeah, I think there's enough on there. Yeah, look after yourselves, look after each other, and let's keep moving this world in the right direction, huh?
Nice. A good conclusion. Thank you, Richie.
Thank you, Alex.